The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones even if the heater hums softly inside the car. Marwa's eyes were heavy, stinging from the fatigue of a double shift at the diner. She glanced in the rearview mirror where her 3-year-old son, Sammy, slept soundly, his small head tilted to the side, his lips parted slightly. That peaceful sight was the only thing that gave her strength during these exhausting nights. Her car rattled along the almost empty road, the streetlights casting weak circles of yellow on the pavement. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, mentally calculating tomorrow's bills. Rent was due, the daycare fees too, and the leak in the kitchen roof was getting worse with every drizzle. Life seemed like one long uphill climb, but she refused to stop. She had promised herself, and Sammy, that she would never let him feel the weight of her struggles. Just as she turned a corner near the outskirts of town, the distant roar of an engine caught her attention. She squinted at the road ahead, her pulse quickening. A sleek black car, far too expensive to belong in this part of the city, was weaving clumsily between lanes. The tires screeched as it veered dangerously close to the sidewalk before correcting itself at the last second. Marwa's breath hitched. "Please, don't crash," she whispered under her breath, slowing her car instinctively. But the inevitable happened. The luxury vehicle swerved sharply and, with a loud screech, plowed into the grassy shoulder of the road before grinding to a halt. Marwa's hands froze on the wheel. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She could keep driving, pretend she hadn't seen anything. After all, she had Sammy in the backseat, and stopping for a stranger in the middle of the night wasn't exactly safe. But then she thought of the way the car had jerked, the possibility of someone being hurt inside. She glanced again at her son, still asleep, blissfully unaware, and felt the tug of her conscience. Cursing under her breath, Marwa pulled her old sedan onto the side of the road a few feet away. She rolled down her window, the night air sharp against her face, and called out nervously. "Hello, are you okay?" The driver's side door opened with difficulty, and a man stumbled out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed money. But the way he swayed on his feet told Marwa all she needed to know: he was drunk. His steps were uneven, his eyes glassy, his words slurred as he muttered something unintelligible. Fear prickled at her skin. Drunk men had never brought her anything but trouble. For a second, she considered leaving him there. But then she saw his hand clutching at the car door, his face pale, his movements sluggish. If she abandoned him, he could collapse, freeze in the cold, or worse, try to drive again. Marwa stepped out cautiously, keeping her voice firm. "You can't stay out here. Come on, sit in my car. I'll drive you home." The man lifted his head, blinking at her like he was struggling to focus. "Why would you?" he mumbled, swaying dangerously. "Because if you get back in that car, you'll kill yourself, or someone else," Marwa shot back, her tone sharper now. He stared at her for a moment longer, then nodded clumsily. She guided him to her car, careful to keep some distance, her body tense. He smelled of expensive cologne mixed with alcohol, a combination that made her wrinkle her nose. When she opened the passenger door, he slumped into the seat, letting out a heavy sigh. Don't call the police," he muttered, almost pleading. Marwa tightened her grip on the steering wheel as she slid back behind it. "I'm not here to ruin your life. Just tell me where you live." There was a pause. Then, with effort, he gave her an address, an upscale neighborhood far from her own crumbling apartment complex. She glanced at Sammy again, still asleep, and whispered a prayer for protection before pulling back onto the road. As she drove through the quiet streets, she couldn't stop her thoughts from racing. Who was this man? What kind of life did he live that he could afford to lose control so recklessly? And why did fate throw him onto her path tonight, when all she wanted was to get home and rest? The man leaned his head against the window, his eyes half shut, his voice low and broken. You didn't have to stop." Marwa swallowed hard, her own exhaustion pressing heavier on her chest. "Maybe not," she whispered, almost to herself. "But sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't give you a choice." The silence that followed was thick, filled only by the hum of the engine and Sammy's soft breathing. And though she didn't know it yet, this unplanned detour in the middle of a cold night was about to change everything in her life. The next morning, Marwa woke up groggy, her body aching from the endless cycle of shifts and worry. The sunlight seeped weakly through the thin curtains of her small apartment, and for a moment she thought last night had been a strange dream. But then she noticed it, the crisp white envelope slid halfway under her front door. She frowned, slipping out of bed quietly so as not to wake Sammy. Her bare feet padded across the worn floor as she picked it up. The envelope had no name, just a weight that made her chest tighten. Tearing it open, she found a handwritten note on thick paper. "Thank you for helping me. You didn't have to. I owe you more than words. H." Tucked inside was a sleek business card embossed with gold letters. Haris Qureshi, CEO, Qureshi Technologies. A company she'd seen on billboards, in magazines, on advertisements flashing across the diner's tiny TV. She blinked at the card in disbelief. The man she'd dragged into her car last night, the drunk who had leaned helplessly against her passenger seat, was one of the most powerful men in the city. Her first instinct was irritation. Why did people like him get to drown themselves in whiskey and still live in mansions, while she fought tooth and nail just to keep her son fed? She tossed the card onto the table, muttering under her breath. "I don't need your gratitude. I need my own life to work." But by noon, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Ms. Marwa." The voice was smoother now, sober, composed. It was him. "Haris, I hope this isn't a bad time. I wanted to thank you properly. Could we meet, just for coffee?" Her instinct screamed no. She didn't belong in his world, and she didn't need charity. But there was something in his tone, earnest, almost vulnerable, that made her pause. Against her better judgment, she agreed, setting the meeting for the next day. The small cafe she chose was far from fancy, a place she could breathe without feeling out of place. She arrived early, smoothing her thrifted blouse nervously. When he walked in, every pair of eyes followed him. Haris was sharply dressed, confidence in every step, but his gaze softened when it found her. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. For a moment, silence lingered, broken only by the clink of cups and low hum of chatter around them. Marwa crossed her arms. "You didn't need to track me down. I wasn't expecting all this." "I know," Haris admitted, his voice low. "But you saved me. You didn't even know me, yet you stopped when no one else would. People don't usually do that anymore." She lifted an eyebrow. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I couldn't leave someone on the side of the road." "That's it," he smiled, faintly, almost amused by her bluntness. "Still, I want to help you. Anything you need, money, work, daycare for your son, just ask." Her eyes narrowed instantly. "I don't want your charity." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she meant every syllable. "I work hard for what I have. I don't need to be someone's pity project." For a long moment, Haris just studied her. Unlike most people who softened under his presence, Marwa's spine only straightened more. Then, instead of arguing, he nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but maybe you'll let me buy you coffee, at least." Despite herself, Marwa felt the tension in her chest ease just a little. The conversation shifted. He asked about her life, and for once, someone wasn't just nodding absent-mindedly while she talked. He listened, really listened. She found herself telling him about the long hours at the diner, about fixing leaky pipes with duct tape, about Sammy's obsession with toy cars. At some point, she caught herself smiling, then quickly smothered it. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to enjoy talking to a man who lived in a penthouse and probably had drivers, chefs, and assistants at his beck and call. When their coffee cups were empty, Haris leaned forward. "You may not want my help, Marwa, and I'll respect that. But I'm not going to disappear. You've reminded me of something I lost a long time ago, what it means to be human, not just successful. Maybe I'd like to learn from you." Her heart skipped, but she masked it with a dry laugh. "Trust me, there's nothing glamorous about being me." He smiled again, more warmly this time. "I don't want glamour. I want real." Marwa stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. "Well, then, you've got my number. Just don't expect me to drop everything for you." As she walked out of the cafe, she told herself it was the last time. Yet, deep down, a whisper she couldn't silence asked what it might mean, for her, for Sammy, for the man who had looked at her not with pity, but with something startlingly close to respect. The days that followed their coffee meetings slipped by quietly, but something had shifted in Marwa's life. She told herself nothing would come of it. After all, she was a single mother juggling shifts at the diner, and Haris was a CEO with an empire under his name. Their worlds weren't just different, they were galaxies apart. Yet somehow, he kept showing up, not intruding, but weaving himself into her days in subtle ways. It began with a package left at her doorstep. Inside were new school supplies for Sammy, pencils, crayons, a sturdy backpack. No note this time, but she knew it was him. At first, she bristled. Her pride screamed against accepting anything from someone like Horace. But when Sammy squealed with delight at the sight of his new crayons, Marwa couldn't bring herself to return them. Next came groceries. She arrived home one evening after her shift to find a bag neatly tucked by her door, fresh vegetables, fruit, and even a carton of milk she hadn't been able to afford that week. She tried to convince herself it was a neighbor's mistake, but when it happened again, and again, she knew. Each time, her resistance weakened just a little, replaced by something warmer, though she refused to name it. One rainy afternoon, her kitchen roof gave way, sending water dripping steadily into a pan she'd placed on the floor. She sighed, wiping her forehead with her sleeve, wondering how much a repairman would cost. Hours later, when she returned from work, she found the leak fixed, patched perfectly, the ceiling sealed. A note sat on the counter. Couldn't let you live under a storm, H. Marwa pressed the note to her chest, torn between gratitude and frustration. She wanted to scream at him for meddling. But she also wanted to cry because for once, someone had seen her struggles and cared enough to act. When she confronted him about it, Horace only smiled. You let everyone else lean on you, Marwa. Why is it so hard for you to let someone lean in for you? His words lingered long after he left. Weeks melted into a rhythm neither of them had expected. He began visiting, sometimes bringing Sammy small toys, sometimes just sitting with her in the diner during her breaks, sipping coffee and listening. Sammy took to him quickly, giggling when Horace helped him build Lego towers or pushed him on the swing in the park. And slowly, against every wall she had built, Marwa felt her heart beginning to soften. One evening, Horace invited her to a company gala. She almost laughed at the idea. Do you know how ridiculous I'd look standing next to you in some glittering ballroom? I don't belong there. But Horace shook his head gently. You belong wherever you choose to stand, Marwa. And I'd be proud to have you beside me, not as someone I owe, but as someone I respect. His sincerity disarmed her. Against her instincts, she agreed. The night of the gala, she borrowed a simple dress from a neighbor, smoothing the fabric nervously as she stood in front of the mirror. When Horace arrived to pick her up, his expression left her breathless. He didn't see the exhaustion in her eyes, the calluses on her hands. He saw her, just her. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, glittering gowns, and the soft hum of live music. Marwa felt every pair of eyes on her, whispers trailing in her wake. But Horace stayed close, his hand steady at her back, his voice calm as he introduced her to people who looked at him with awe. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the tired waitress or the struggling single mother. She was a woman who had saved a man's life, and who now stood tall in a room that had never been meant for her. At one point, Horace leaned down, his voice low. You think you don't belong here, but I've never belonged anywhere more than when I'm with you. Her heart stuttered, tears threatening to rise. She glanced at him, then at the room filled with polished faces and shallow smiles. And she realized something. This wasn't about wealth, or power, or status. It was about choice, and in that moment, she chose to believe that her life could be more than just survival. As the night wore on, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, her head held high, her hand resting lightly in Horace's. For the first time in years, she didn't see a woman worn down by struggles. She saw someone strong, someone worthy, someone who had found a connection built not on pity, but on respect and something deeper that neither of them dared to name yet. And as they left the gala, stepping into the cool night air, Horace turned to her. His eyes, unguarded and sincere, searched hers. Marwa, that night on the road, you didn't just save me. You changed me. I don't want this to be charity, or guilt. I want this to be, us. She swallowed, her pulse racing. The fear of hope was sharp in her chest. But as Sammy's laughter echoed in her memory, and as Horace's hand brushed gently against hers, Marwa allowed herself the smallest smile. Maybe, just maybe, their lives had found a road worth walking together.